Welcome, craftsmen, to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. It's your host, Brother Gabriel, and joining me tonight is a good friend of mine, good brother of mine, and a wonderful member of Genoa Lodge number 433, Brother Staler.
I've ever heard you lie 3 times in a row like that.
Oh, it's not a lie. You're a wonderful brother of Lodge.
I try to be.
So, and that's what's important. You try to be a good brother of Genoa Lodge 433. So, craftsmen, welcome to the show, Brother Ricky Staler.
So, craftsmen, I hope you feel ready to be speculative in nature tonight, because the topic tonight is something I think most Masons will know pretty near and dear to their hearts, but it's a question that is asked pretty often.
Is it, are we having green beans for dinner?
No. It is, what is the length of your cable toe?
Ooh.
So today we'll be talking about the cable toe, and I went ahead and did a little bit of research on the topic. I like the idea of maybe even turning this into a little bit of an LEO program. But so, Gabriel, I know how much you love World War II, and you are a big historic aficionado. Do you know where any of the origins of the word cable toe might be? Because, brethren, we are trying to understand and then potentially solve the question of what is the length of your cable toe.
I assume it would have kind of a nautical base, boats, ropes, that kind of thing. They tend to go hand in hand.
You would be correct, at least speculatively. So there's a few different origins that I found, as there's a lot of Masons who have tried to identify where the word cable toe comes from and, you know, its earliest meanings, so we can understand how we use it now and how it's changed over the times, just as Masons have changed over the times. But yes, one of them is coming from the nautical tow line, and the nautical connection, a tow line, basically just means a rope that is used for towing. It's very simple, but there's so many words that change their meaning over time and get added in or taken out or modified to mean all sorts of things. And as Masons, as a group as old as we are, as historically as far back reaching as we are, it makes a lot of sense to me that we would have some things that we use for our terminology that have changed over time or come from one place in particular, and the roots will shift and shape their way over time to something a little different or something a little newer. Another origin might be from the German word cable toe, pronounced almost exactly like cable toe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly in German, but if I understand correctly, it basically is just cable toe. You say it a little faster though. But that means cable rope. And what's really interesting is the word cable toe has no origin in English.
Really?
The Oxford Dictionary does not recognize the word. Even if you go on OED.com, which is the Oxford English Language, dictionary.com, try looking it up. Cable-toe, as in T-O-W, not what's on your feet. And it doesn't even recognize it as a word. So because of that, there's also a lot of Masons who speculate that the word is specifically Masonic in origin. It is a word that was made up by Masons for Masons, which that is something I thought was like really neat, because how often do you get to participate in a group or an organization that, they use the language, we all use language, but they also come up with their own code words. I feel a little Gen Z over here,
That's pretty cool. I mean, it is really interesting to think about that like it sounds like an English phrase, it sounds like an English word, but it's really interesting to think about how it's not even in our English dictionary. Yeah. So that is pretty interesting.
That was one of the coolest parts of my little bit of research that I did. There's another origin for the word though, and the origin actually comes from the Bible, because there's 2 references that could mean something very close to cable toe. One is from, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing this right, Hosea? Well, anyway, the reference is one of 2. Quote, I led them gently with cords of man, with bonds of love, end quote. Or, depending on your version of the Bible, quote, I led them with cords of human kindness, with ties of love, end quote. But it's specifically in reference to a story about being led or leading, and there's a lot of allegory there involving marriage. There's a lot of allegory there involving God's pursuit of a relationship, and the relationship being God having a lot of faith and somebody else not having that faith. but I'll get to that a little bit later because it ties in with something else that I think most Masons will recognize the symbology of. So just a little tidbit for later, gentlemen. There's a little foreshadowing for you. The other one is in Kings 20, 31, and 32, when the Syrian king was defeated in battle. His servants approached the victorious Israeli king with ropes upon their heads in order to remind him about a pledge. So when thinking about the cable toe and the way that we use the word cable toe within the length of your cable toe, there's all of the origins, but what is the true meaning? What does it refer to? In most cases, when a Mason uses the word cable toe, we are referring to an expectation or an obligation or the limit to which we feel like we can do something or achieve something, without harming ourselves or without harming someone else in the process. And that's what everything kind of boils back to, is that question is, what is the length of your cable toe? What is that limitation? So let me skip to the physical meanings of cable toe and I'll come back to the symbolic. Before I get there though, Brother Gabe, do you have, what is your physical definition of a cable toe? Like, what does a cable toe refer to physically?
So physically, what I imagine it referring to is a set of rope, an actual length of rope that either ties you to something or ties something to something else. It's like a set of rope attaching two things at each end.
Yeah. It's specifically a rope connecting two things, and the purpose of the rope is to lead or pull or guide or tow in some manner, in some way, shape, or form. So when thinking about the cable toe, there's a couple of physical definitions for the specific length of a cable toe that dates back from a long, long time ago. One of them refers to a cable toe being a length of 3 miles. If I understand my research correctly, I think this was in reference to kind of like the old colonial days where there was a lot of villages and towns that were being made, and a lot of them in the early days, they had their own lodges. And those lodges would be set up in town, and most people were willing to travel, about 3 miles because that was reasonable to them. 3-mile travel was acceptable, was part of everyday life, and it wasn't, extreme or too much. That could be pretty simple for them. Mm-hmm. Travel back then on horseback or by walking 3 miles even today isn't super far. Most people can do that in about an hour. That seems reasonable for many people. Eventually, there's another physical definition of length that is referred to specifically as anywhere from 15 inches to 15 miles. And if I understand correctly, this is again kind of in reference to the idea of how far someone can be expected to travel to attend lodge. Because the idea was, way back then, with there being a lot of lodges, there was a lot of really ease of access or very difficult access, because you'd have to travel 50, 60, 70 miles to another town or another settlement large enough to sustain a lodge or to be supported and sponsored by a lodge.
Well, it's like, that's why every small village in Ohio has or had a Masonic lodge, because back in the day, even when we had cars, even after the turn to the 20th century, it was still an effort to get from small Genoa to Oak Harbor or Port Clinton. It was still a decent amount of time and travel and distance to go to lodge, so it would make sense that there would be a lodge in Genoa and in Port Clinton, and in Oak Harbor, and everywhere else as well.
Yeah, so that's why, to me at least, it definitely makes a lot of sense that the physical meaning of cable toe is that kind of obligation of how far can I expect you to travel to show up to lodge? If I were the master of lodge and I was pestering all of my officers and the brothers on the sidelines to show up, can I expect them to travel 20 miles or 25 miles, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? What is that reasonable expectation? So moving on from the physical meanings, there's a lot more symbolic meanings, and that is, to me, where we as Masons thrive, because we're no longer the bricklaying Masons fold. We're the speculative Masons. We're taking these ideas, we're taking these very physical things, and we're giving them new life in a way. Whether it's coming up with new meanings for them or trying to apply them in something kind of similar, but something a little bit longer lasting than brick. Because to me, one of the beauties of language is that an idea, a thought, a concept, That can outlast cement, concrete, stone. And how else do we build a man if not by his ideals? So here in Masonry, symbolically, the cable toe could represent the bond between a Mason or a Masonic candidate and their lodge. And in my little bit of research, one of the other interesting tidbits that I found is that there are some lodges in Europe, that only use the cable toe in 1 degree, in the first degree. They do not use it after that, which might be something that many of us here in America might see as a little bit different. But specifically, if I understand correctly, England, Scotland, and France use the cable toe only in the first degree. Now, I have not been able to talk to any brothers over across the pond to verify this, so please, if you are able to and you hear this, let me know. By all means, please correct me. It's just kind of a neat little piece of information that could be cool. But in Europe, specifically for England, Scotland, and France, again, if I understand my research correctly, the cable toe represents the connection between the candidate and the lodge until their obligation is said. Once they give that obligation, their obligation replaces that connection between the Mason and the lodge. I thought that was really impactful.
That's an interesting way to think about it. And I mean, first off, you and I, we don't know the ins and outs of the English ritual or the French ritual like we know our own ritual here in Ohio. And I mean, the thing is that we can't really talk about it over the radio waves. Like, we can't talk about the exact specifics of the degree, but it is really interesting to think that there may be a very large symbolic impact behind how they treat the cable toe over there versus over here, and when they use it and what they use it for, et cetera, et cetera. It is pretty interesting to think that it could mean something way more impactful over there than I think we give it credit for over here in the degrees.
Yeah, that's a lot of what my lines of thinking are as well, because we've got a couple of brothers of Junior Lodge here who've been able to travel over and have talked at length a little bit about some of the travels over in England and over in Europe with some of these lodges. And there's a world of difference between ritual here versus over there, and some of the things that they do might look strange or unique to us. But it all really boils down to, we're all still Masons. We all still meet on the level. Even if we have different tracks or different paths, or if there's different working tools we really care about and associate ourselves with, we're all Masons when it comes down to it. Whether it's the lofty worshipful master or the lowly sideline peanut gallery, we all mean the same thing when it comes down to it. We're all just a bunch of rough ashlers working towards being perfect ashlers.
Is that all I am to you now that I'm not the master of the lodge? Is I'm just the bag of peanuts on the sideline?
And you are delicious, my friend. But yeah, it's really cool to think about how over in England, Scotland, and France, they might put a lot more emphasis on the cable toe. And brothers Charlie and Mark have talked a little bit in Genoa Lodge about how important the mentorship is over there for newer Masons and how long that process is. And to me, it makes a lot of sense that maybe, and I don't know, so please correct me, brethren, if you know the ritual and I don't, from those who practice over in England, Scotland, and France at least, if they have their degree work done and they come back at a later point in time to continue on in their degree work, maybe the first time they're there, they're going through degree work and they get the cable toe experience. And then if that's all it is just that one moment, and then you have 6 months to express emphasis on how important that cable toe is, or the idea of the cable toe representing the connection or the pledge or even the obligation that eventually replaces it. That makes, to me, in my mind at least, that makes a lot of sense, and that puts a lot of, it puts a lot of effort into the idea of mentorship, because you're pushing that emphasis on what it means to have a pledge, what it means to have an obligation, to make a promise.
Well, the thing is, and that's, I'm glad that you kind of bring this up, because it's kind of in my mind what the separation is. Like, to me, the cable toe isn't The cable tow isn't like the signature on a contract or anything to me. The cable tow isn't like a binding contract. The oaths that we take are the contract, and then the cable tow is kind of like the representation of how you go about fulfilling that obligation, kind of, or the ability you have to take yourself where you are needed or where you can have yourself go to fulfill the obligations that you have sworn to upkeep.
Yeah, and that's just it. Maybe the cable tow in lodges in England, France, and Scotland, and maybe elsewhere throughout Europe, maybe the cable tow has meaning there it doesn't have here. And because over the course of time, the lodges here in America came originally from their roots in Europe, and the lodges grew on two separate branches, almost like a tree diverging. Now I have two branches, and those branches are going to keep growing towards what they can, looking for sunlight, looking for rain, looking for growth, as all men should. And with that idea in mind, how can we presume that two branches will grow the exact same way? And that, to me, is where so many things about Masonry is just really beautiful, because we can have these differences. We can have these unique experiences, unique stories. We can have these unique origins, unique meanings, and yet we're all still from the same roots. We all still come from the same seeds.
I like that.
To continue on the symbolic representation of the cable tow, another potential candidate for what the cable tow represents is a vow or a pledge in which a man pledges his life. So for me, in my research, this kind of falls along the same lines as some of the lodges in Europe may be using the cable tow as that initial physical representation of the connection between the man and lodge, to then be replaced by the obligation. Because all Masons, we all make certain promises, and the idea is that we pledge ourselves. It is us. If we don't uphold our promise, it is our word on the line, and we equate our word to us as a whole. If we don't keep a promise, we're not reliable. If we can't be reliable, how can we be considered good workers?
Well, I mean, exactly. Like we just recently had a education program here at this lodge, and I said I was going to be here, and I got home from work and I was like, I don't want to go. I'm so tired. The kid's rowdy, needs to be put to bed, needs to be fed. I got to shower, change. I don't want to go. And then I was like, you said you were going to be there. So I go and I attend the education program because I had said that I was going to be there. So if I say that I'm going to be there and I still have the little bit of the effort, the little bit of that cable tow tugging on me, I can get over here. It was interesting. I was tired, but it was a great education program. I'm glad I caught it, and I'm glad that I was here for it. But it was one of those days where you really don't want to do something, but you said you were going to do it, so you got to do it.
I'm really glad that you brought up the LEO program that we had here recently, because I also made the promise of being there in attendance, and then I unfortunately was not able to attend. I play soccer, and I pay to play soccer, and we had games that were scheduled on that Tuesday, and I thought they were supposed to be on Monday, so I misread my calendar, and I had to think to myself, man, what's more important to me? What's within the length of my cable tow? Is it going to be something that's a service that I pay for that I enjoy, or is it going to be kind of another service that I pay for and enjoy? Like, which one do I choose here? But I was able to come over and help assist with getting the lodge set up for the program as a way to maneuver my cable tow to make me still participating in some way, shape, or form.
Well, exactly. It's not like it's set in stone, and of course there are always circumstances for everything in Masonry. Like, yeah, you said you're going to be there. Like say you're a warden, and you've got to be there for the warden and deacons class, and you say you're going to be there, and your tire blows out or something like that's or your family is sick and you got to help take care of your family or something like that's not like a violation of your cable tow, at least in my mind. I mean, there might be some people in this world who might think a little stricter on that than I do, but I don't see that as like a violation of your cable tow or anything, because I don't think the cable tow is necessarily like I've been saying, etched in stone or a contract written in blood. It's an idea. It's an idea that you hold yourself to.
Reasonable limitation.
There you go.
And I really like the idea of you bringing up the analogy of the cable tow not set in stone, because while a lot of us know that the shortest distance between any 2 points is a straight line, sometimes a straight line is not the best path to get there. And the cable tow is really kind of, in a way, all about our connection to something and how we're going to get from point A to point B, whether or not we should go from point A to point B, and how much energy, how much time, how much of our resources is it going to tax us or take from us to make that travel. And as all traveling men know, sometimes you need a couple of detours, sometimes you need to fill up the gas tank, sometimes you miss the exit, and you go on a little side adventure. And it's just a part of life. And if we're all here trying to get from our current point A to our next point B, sometimes it's not the straightest path that's going to get us there. And that windy, ropey journey might be what we need.
That's almost like the winding rope of a cable tow.
It is awfully like the winding rope of a cable tow. So mind blown. I'm just having this like mental image of the guy from the National History Channel with a little bit of a mussed up hair going aliens in my mind. Every time I have my own little like euphoric moment of eureka.
Your little mental epiphany with everything relating to lodge and symbolism and everything.
Oh yeah, as a traditional millennial, most of my ideas about myself are defined by memes.
Thank you, Brother Samuel. That resonated with Brother Samuel very.
They have broken
very
our other
highly.
host.
If you're in the market for even more Masonic content, check out our brothers from 357 Studio. Enjoy this short message from their host.
At Studio 357 Masonic Podcast, we consider ourselves to be the blue-collar Masons. We're not professionals, we're not very well-spoken, but we are 100% genuine in every show that we put out. Every Mason has a story, and we want to help tell it. We are available in video versions on YouTube and Spotify, and audio versions just about everywhere else. Please follow us on our socials on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We hope to see you on our show. Travel well, my brothers.
But yes, so Brother Staler, you've put in a lot of work into this. You really like delving deep into some concepts in Masonry, don't you?
I really do. And this particular question is one that is very near and dear to my heart, because I'm often asking myself, like, how much does this matter to me? I would definitely consider myself a person of self-reflection. Like, there's a lot of times where I'm just trying to be aware of how I'm thinking and feeling and caring about something. So when there's a question from Masonry that kind of leads into that a bit, I've gone pretty attached to the idea. And as with many things, as somebody who's not been an officer before, and as somebody who's still a little bit on the younger side of Masonry, there's a lot of other individuals who have used this phrase. What's the length of your cable tow? Is this within the length of your cable tow? And I've picked up on that, and it's something that's definitely stuck in my ear like a little worm for quite some time now. So yeah, when we had the idea to do an episode about this topic, I really latched on. And then in the research for it, I found a lot of stuff kind of cool. And I think that's one of the great things about Masonry is if not like the inherent push to learn, to grow, to discover, to explore, to be, something along the lines of speculative. There's also the idea that we're building towards something, and if I'm going to build towards something, why not build towards a better understanding of myself, so I can know what my weaknesses and strengths are, so I can play into those things. Or if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I need help splitting this neuron over here, I can be like, my guy, I have no idea how to help you with that. I don't have a particle accelerator. I'm not the one for this job. That's not within the length of my cable tow. And yeah. So I've got a couple more three more meanings, potential symbolic meanings for cable tow.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to hear them.
So one is taking the idea of the lodge being symbolic of something, the initiation into lodge being symbolic of something else, and the cable tow being symbolic of kind of the connection between the two. So this is much more speculative in nature. But imagine lodge is a symbol of the world. The way that we grow within lodge, the way that we use the working tools, the way that we learn about the working tools or apply them to logic or to problems that are mathematical or geometric in nature. The way that we grow with that can be complemented with the initiation as being a symbol of life itself. And so, in being initiated in lodge or being initiated into the idea of life in general, Masons grow through the degrees. We learn a little bit more, we grow a little bit with that information, and we start applying it and using it. So if the lodge is symbolic of the world, the initiation is symbolic of life, what do you think the cable tow could symbolize in that connection?
So I'm not sure what do you think it symbolizes in that situation?
I think there's a good argument that it symbolizes the umbilical cord. Because through the umbilical cord, you have the transfer of like all the life-giving energies, right? And so the cable tow being intrinsic in the initiation into Masonry, you have the idea of the cable tow being that umbilical cord, that physical connection. But this is, again, what the cable tow could represent. This is all speculative in nature. This is all, thinking about it in different abstract ways. But I really like this kind of idea because, in listening to the podcast, there's been a couple of different times where guys talk about life kind of starting anew for them after joining lodge because they look at the world differently. They look at life differently. Masonry, sometimes, in its most basic form, is really just kind of a new perspective.
I would have to say yeah, because you use the teachings and the symbolism and the learning how to see things differently to adjust and change how you look at the world and how you look at life and how you look at your fellow man and how you look at your brothers around you and how you interact with all of it. So I do think that's a pretty good philosophical idea there. So,
yeah. And then also, the last one is, I thought I had 5, but I forgot I actually had 1.5 earlier on that I mentioned. So the last one that I was able to kind of dig up here is the cable tow could be a physical representation of a candidate's belief and devotion in God. So God is kind of an important and central figure in Masonry, and as well as for many people who are devout. And, there's a lot of different religions where there's, one unifying God. So in Masonry, the idea that the cable tow could be that representation of the belief and devotion in God, but also being bound to God, in allowing oneself to be brought out of the darkness of the lack or the non-existence of God into the light of God. And I think that there's a lot of brothers who will recognize some symbology there. But to me, that's really unique too, and it's interesting because it ties in so well, I think, with the idea of like thinking of lodge as like a symbol of the world, initiation being the symbol of life, the cable tow being the symbol of like the umbilical cord. It's still referring to a really important connection between these two things, and whether it's the connection between the devotion from a person and God, the idea of the connection from like life and the world in general, it can still be simplified down to the connection between a man or a Mason and his lodge.
So, and that's a really interesting way to look at it, because honestly, I've never quite viewed it that way. I've always viewed it more as a connection between Masons and a connection between a Mason and the fraternity as a whole, not just the lodge. But I do have to say, overall, with your philosophical research and your esoteric research here, I definitely believe that
esoterics.
Oh yeah, how breaking news: Mason believes and talks about something esoteric. What a bold new world we live in. But no, I definitely see LEO in your future potentially.
You know what the
maybe
worst, like,
maybe district education officer in your future.
Hold your horses over there. Let's go back to, the horse and carriage days. Relax. But a few years ago, there was an event that happened in Northwest Ohio that was called Camp Masonry. And I remember like helping and volunteering at Camp Masonry a couple of different times because somebody else, Brother Wilvin, kind of pulled me into it and, said it'd be a lot of fun. And it was a lot of fun. And I remember myself in my early Masonic days griping at Camp Masonry the second year round because of all the esoteric lectures and the talks of all these esoteric guest speakers. And here I am literally 6 years later and I'm becoming one of them.
You have the beard and everything. You've become the wise old man. Very old and wise. Very.
I don't know about the wise part, but I'll give you the old. My back does hurt on most days. But that kind of leads into how we use the cable tow today.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we talk about the cable tow, what do we really talk about now? We've talked about the origins. We've talked about where it might come from, what it might mean, what it might represent symbolically. But as you hit on, we use the cable tow today mostly in connection of how connected to the lodge are we? How reasonable is it that I will do X, Y, or Z for the lodge or X, Y, or Z for another Mason? Because when it comes down to it, we all have these limitations on us, whether it's time, energy, travel, gas money, bills, money for fun, the ideas of being able to rejuvenate oneself through rest or through, your hobbies and interests. What point do we decide, yes, I can do this, or no, I'm sorry, brother, I just can't?
Yeah, and that's really the big question at the end of the day concerning the cable tow is where, because each Mason has to decide for themselves where that line is, and also it changes with the idea, it changes with the task, it changes with the day, it changes with the challenges of the brother's life. And it just, it is evolving. It is an evolving concept every day. So, but I guess what I really want to know is you've presented all of this. You've done a very good job. But I want to hear your very specific interpretation, not an esoteric interpretation. I want to hear Brother Ricky Staler, who lives in Genoa, who comes to Genoa Lodge 433, who does an awesome job with the charges for the degrees. I want to hear what your specific nitty-gritty interpretation is, your personal interpretation.
Say please.
That's beyond the length of my cable tow to say that too. No.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you...
Please, Brother Staler. I would love to hear...
I am very glad that you asked because I would like to present to you and to all the brothers who might be listening and even all the people out there who think that they might be able to use the idea of like the length of their own cable tow in their own life. It's a warning. The idea of the length of your cable tow is that your cable tow is not unlimited. There is no expectation in the world that should be placed upon you that this has to happen and everything else is not important no matter what it is to you. It's a warning because please just don't exceed the length of your cable tow. We don't want it. We don't need it. We don't need you to go above and beyond what your capabilities are, what is reasonable for you, and to snap. And I think that that's one of the things that is relevant to maybe some of the Masons who have stepped away from Lodge, whether it be for a short time or a long time, is because maybe they push themselves outside of the bounds of their cable tow. It's a warning. Don't exceed the length of your cable tow. Choose to maybe not necessarily protect yourself. I mean, we all need a little discomfort to grow, but recognize what your limitations are. Recognize what is reasonable.
See, this is why I love having these types of conversations with yourself and Brother Wilburn, because your definition and your idea, while I believe it's completely true and completely valid, is very different from my idea of it. Because when I think of the cable tow, I think of almost this like interconnected web. Almost like a spider web, like that the lodge is in there and all of my brothers are in there, and everything that is part of the fraternity is in there, and all of the esoteric ideas of the fraternity are all interconnected by this weaving cable tow. And I have been told that I sometimes do have a long cable tow, that I like to think that I have a very long cable tow because I've always been devoted to the lodge, devoted to my friends, devoted to my brothers, devoted to my career, devoted to my military service, devoted to service in general, be it of my church community, of my local community, of anything that I can do. And very often my wife and my therapist will tell me that I tend to overstretch myself a little bit, that I sometimes take on a lot, but it's not that I want a challenge. It's that it's almost like the idea of that if it's been set before me and I can do it, I'm going to try to do it. Like when Brother Race calls and needs something and I just got off work, I have to go help him move 100 chainsaws from his garage into my trailer that he uses as a storage unit.
That's not even an exaggeration.
Yeah, but it's a thing. I've come home from work. I'm tired, but he's a brother, and I'm going to do that because he's my friend. He's my brother. And when it comes to being on committees for lodge, do I need one more thing to do in my life? Not really. But at the same time, it's almost like if the lodge trusts me enough to ask me to do that, that means they believe that I can do it. So it's almost a personal opportunity for growth of maybe I can take this challenge on. Maybe my cable tow is this strong and is this long. So I really appreciate it because, again, as I've talked with Brother Wilburn, I'm not much of a self-reflectionist because sometimes I get uncomfortable looking in the mirror. So I tend to surround myself with positive ideas or like self-reassuring ideas of like, oh, I can get this done for you. I'm the strong brother who has the longest cable tow. And I feel like sometimes I actually need to hear your version and interpretation of the cable tow because I sometimes see the cable tow as this infinite amount of length that I will go rather than a limit to keep myself in check, which circumscribing bounds, we talk about that a lot, knowing your limitations. The thing is that I have so many other limitations in my life. I try to say, no, I'm not going to be limited by that. I'm going to help this brother and that brother, and I'm going to do this community service, and I'm going to be on this committee, and I'm going to do this plan for my master's term. And then I wind up at 3:00 in the morning having gotten no sleep because I'm trying to do 100 things at once. And
let me ask you, Brother Fawcett, is that reasonable?
Yes.
To you it is.
Sometimes.
That's what it boils down to.
Hi, Craftsman. Brother Samuel here. Not really in this episode.
He got here late, that's why.
No, I didn't. I've been here the whole time. Anyway, but here's my question to you, Gabe. You have an infinite cable tow. Do you feel like you do any of those things better when you overwork yourself that much? Because at the end of the day, you do have things on that cable tow that are never going to move. You've got your kid and your wife and your job. Those are always going to be on your cable tow. So all that's left is that little bit that's left. So my question to you is if you overstack that and things are falling off the edge, is it more effective to pick a few little things that you know you can help with and do a really good job with, or if you overstack it, because it is not infinite. I can promise you that.
And Craftsman, I'm starting a debate on this podcast. It's amazing.
So, and that's fair, and that's completely recognizable, and that's incredibly valid. It's just in my mind, when it comes to the idea of the cable tow and other things in life, it is almost of a, because you're right, you do have to choose your battles. You do have to know what your limitations are, but sometimes there comes a point in your points throughout your entire life where you should rise to the challenge. So like for instance, so for instance, like for me, one of my tasks during the winter at work is snow plowing. And we're on revolving 12-hour shifts 24/7 when we have major snowstorms, because we have to keep infrastructure open. We have to keep critical infrastructure open. And it was when I first started, because we're not supposed to work over 12 hours. We're not supposed to, but we do if it's needed. In the first 2 weeks that I had started this job, I worked a 23-hour shift, 23.5-hour shift, because we had a massive snowstorm and we had power out all over the city. So we had to keep the water towers warm. We had to keep the water towers from freezing. We had to keep the roads plowed. We had to keep the salt down. We had to keep the fire station's lot open so that ambulances could get in and out if they needed. And that's the thing, is that recognizing your limitations is very important. Recognizing the limits of the length of your cable tow is incredibly important so that you don't break. But there also comes a time where you can meet the challenge and your cable tow can extend to the horizon because it's what's necessary for yourself, for your brothers, for the fraternity, for service. So, and again, that's something that I struggle with, because I think that I have the stamina of the gods, and I can work 100 24-hour shifts in a row if it's necessary, and I sometimes need to remind myself that I can't. So, and that's me getting off my soapbox. I was going to talk about my general orders in the military and everything, but I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, but that's just it. If I understand what you're picking down here, if I am picking up what you're putting down, there we go. That's words that make sense. What you're telling me is that for you, reasonable is a lot closer to the idea of necessary, or what can you do. It's something more synonymous with that. Not how much is this going to tax me? Just am I able to do this even if I'm tired, even if I'm overworked, even if I'm hungry, even if I only got 3.5 hours of sleep last night? To you, do you think that it's accurate to say that your cable tow is defined as reasonable, defined as capable or necessary?
Yes, I think that's a very apt description of it.
And I hope every brother listening to this and everyone else listening to this who thinks that they might utilize some sort of Masonic knowledge here, if there's a nugget that can be found in all this sauce, define for yourself what's reasonable for you. What is the length of your cable tow? Look at the person in the mirror and ask yourself, how far am I willing to go? What's the lengths to which I am comfortable? Where does the discomfort start? Where does the discomfort turn into pain? And where does the pain turn into perseverance? It's not like any of these things are really the wrong answer, and that's one of the beautiful things about Lodge and about Masonry, is that there's all these different ways that we can look at something. We can spend 45 minutes talking about a phrase that most Masons use on a bi-weekly basis, and I don't know how many of you have spent 45 minutes thinking about it. I certainly have, and I hope that this inspires you. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. How are we going to push on each other to become better men? How are we going to push on each other to grow? How am I going to help you lengthen your cable tow? And how is Brother Gabe going to help me lengthen mine? So, brethren, for all of you who are listening, again, my own thoughts is that it's a warning, but Gabe, what do you think is the real meaning behind the cable tow? And you guys can't see it, but I'm sliding him my homework so that he can cheat off. Because again, there's a lot of different meanings. There's a couple of physical meanings, and then a lot of different symbolic meanings. And the physical meaning is you have something to kind of pull somebody around with, if you really want to. And this is something I actually kind of forgot about. Some lodges use the cable tow as a means to remove improper candidates. And I'd never thought about that before, especially in the first degree. That makes so much sense. Maybe not so much in how we over here in America use the cable tow in some of our other degrees, or at least here in Ohio. But at least in the first degree, I can definitely imagine that being like, oh, watch out, he's pulling out a lightsaber, he's a Sith Lord. We don't want this guy. And, dragging him out by the cable tow.
So, sorry, that just sent me for a loop for a second. So, what was your original question that you posed to me before you talked about a Sith Lord?
What do you think the cable tow represents? I think it represents...
Didn't I just go on like a 12-minute tirade about
And now I would like you to say it one more time, more succinctly, in approximately 3 to 5 seconds. While Gabriel Fawcett is thinking and the popcorn is burning behind his ears, brother, just as I might define the cable tow one way, define it your own way. Figure it out for yourself. In the early days, I'm getting the sense that a lot of lodges used to use this phrase, meaning in what was it a reasonable ask to get somebody to attend meetings? Because my research very heavily brings up and picks up the idea of the cable tow representing 3 miles or 15 inches to 15 miles. And that, to me, really represents how far one should travel to attend lodge. And there's a lot of brothers these days who travel a lot further. So imagine in the future how the length of your cable tow might change, how it might change for masonry as a whole.
I think I have my very short, sweet, to the point, succinct, not preaching answer for you about my cable tow. What the cable tow means to me is how far I can and will go for my brothers. Is that the idea? To me, the brothers are the most important thing. My brothers that I've grown up with in DeMolay are the most important thing. My lodge brothers are the most important thing. If they need something and I have even 0.0001% of my stamina left, but I can still give it to them, I will absolutely do that.
That is a beautiful thing, Gabe, and that's what this organization is all about. It's the connection between the brothers, the connection between the lodges, which is where we all meet, and how we can just stay connected is so, so important. And I've only got one last thing really to say about the cable tow, and regardless of your thoughts or your feelings about it, just think about it like this. The cable tow binds us, it leads us, and it guides us. So figure out your own length. Define it for yourself, whether it's 15 inches, 3 miles, 15 miles, or if it's whatever is capable within you. Define it for yourself, brother.
Well, Craftsman, I think we've had a very impactful, very powerful, very well thought out presentation from Brother Staler tonight. And Brother Staler, I just want to thank you very much for presenting this topic tonight and for presenting it the way you did, because it wasn't just all talking at the Craftsman or the listeners. I think it was very engaging. I think it was very thought-provoking, and I think that's definitely some of what we need in the modern Freemasonry for us younger guys, is that finding very creative ways to be engaging. I mean, that's why we started this podcast in the first place, is because we're in a new era. We are in a new era of how people communicate and how people express themselves and how people expand their mental horizons, which unfortunately through most means of communication on the internet nowadays, there's not much mental horizon expanding, but it's very apt, I think, of you for doing stuff like that, because you're a very well-presented, well-rounded, well-educated person, I think. And I think you have a good way of presenting these types of topics.
Thank you, Brother Gabe. I really, really appreciate that. I mean, and again, listeners at home, I've got some history with Brother Sam and Brother Gabe, and I wouldn't be who I am today without them or without my experience with them in DMLA and going through Masonry. And it's helping me to make the man I'll be tomorrow. And hopefully that man's going to be a good man. Hopefully that man is going to be somebody that you can continue to appreciate and want alongside your journey through your life. And I just got to say, man, this was definitely within the length of my cable toe.
And on that note, Craftsman, I think we'll end tonight. Brother Staylor, thank you for coming on the podcast. Craftsman, on behalf of Brother Samuel and myself and Brother Turco at the Third Degree Masonic Podcast, keep your working tools in order and always be on the level.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Ohio, its officers, or any of its jurisdictions. They only reflect those of the hosts or guests.